everybody, it's Jennifer. I'm back here today with Shayna Bergman to continue our kick-ass leadership series. So I'm going to invite Shayna to join us. Hi, Shayna. How are you?
Hi, Jen. I'm well. How are you?
I am fantastic, and I am so excited for us to be back again. So, for anybody who missed our last session, Shayna and I are doing a 4-part mini series on energy blocks. And this is part 2. Last week, we spoke about limiting beliefs. An energy block is anything that disrupts your progression forward, whether it's in success, in a relationship. We are more successful when we are operating from higher levels of energy. The energy blocks are things that keep us stuck in lower levels of energy. And it's when we're there, it's like we just can't seem to get where we want to go. The energy blocks that we're talking about today are assumptions. Now, what's an assumption? Well, an assumption is when you have a preconceived idea of how something is going to go based on past experiences. And oh boy, does it seem like we're so right about that. But assumptions can hold you back. Shayna, I'm curious, with your clients, what are some of the ways that you've seen assumptions hold people back?
This is a very timely video because I just met with a client before this today, and we were talking about him potentially getting promoted. And what he said was, it was such a long process to go through the last time I tried, and I was declined. And so I don't think I want to go through it again because I might get declined again.
Wow.
It's a perfect example, right? That just because it happened in the past, I'm now taking action and getting in my own way for what could be because I'm assuming it could happen again. That's an assumption.
Right. And what can happen, and that's a perfect example of little mini versions of that can add up over time. And then what happens in this example, 10 years from now, he looks back on his career and is like, how come I just never got as far as I knew I could? Because he doesn't see that he never actually took the steps to move forward because he had a belief that it would have been a futile effort.
Exactly. Well, and I think there's something else that's kind of wrapped in this, which is, if I have an assumption because something happened before that was negative, and I'm assuming that that negative thing is going to happen again, there's something there that's also bringing up like fear and fear failure,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
Okay, so if you don't get it again, like what are you making of that? It doesn't have to be necessarily looked at or viewed at as negative. It could just be, okay, it was a learning. It's another learning for me. What data am I learning from it? And so I think that's sort of the nuance in assumptions that happen is this fear of failure or fear of something.
Yeah, and it can start to become almost a self-protection mechanism because our minds are not designed really for big success.
Mhm.
Our minds are designed to survive, to keep us safe. And while it's not the truth, subconsciously, small is safe. So if I don't put myself out there, if I don't take chances, I won't get hurt.
Mhm.
Now, we know that's not the truth, that going out there is I mean, yeah, everything's risky, but it can be so limiting, and it can even start from childhood. Like I've worked with people who have discovered they would remember they raised their hand in class in 4th grade and they got laughed at. I will never do that again.
Yeah.
Well, now fast forward 20 years, they're in a board meeting and they're not presenting their ideas.
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah. Well, and I think it's interesting with you describing that because I don't think people realize necessarily how much assumptions play a role in their life, to your point, with those big and those little things. And so, for anybody who's watching, maybe think for a minute about where are places where you are making decisions based on something that happened before, even in very small ways, like your example that you just gave, and really like what's behind that, what's going on there, and what could happen for you if you sort of said, okay, that happened once, it doesn't mean it's going to happen again, or I'm willing to sort of see what could happen
Mhm.
again, and I'm willing to not add a whole story to it if it's something that I don't like. It's just a passing moment and I'm going to move on from it versus allowing it to keep me small and safe, which it's really not keeping us safe, but we like to.
Right. Yeah. And the other part of it too is that when we come into a situation, a conversation with an expectation that something is going to go poorly, that energy that we're showing up with is not a very high level of energy when you have an expectation of something bad. That actually influences the outcome.
Mhm.
And it's not only around work. Like I had one client who had trouble in her marriage and she definitely did not want to get a divorce, but was like, she was like done. And when we talked about potential conversations, the answer, he will never do that. I just know him. Like, there's no way he's ever going to be willing to blah, blah, blah. Right. And when we started to shift her energy and her approach and how she saw it, it was unbelievable because she started to change who she was. He ended up coming to her to propose a conversation, and she was completely shocked. And while our assumptions, they seem so real and we have so much evidence to support them, they're still just stories that we're living
It's
inside of.
true. Well, and I think, I know that there's a saying or a belief that you and I think both subscribe to, which is energy is contagious. And I don't necessarily realize that the subconscious energy that we're giving out, that we're putting out, people can read that. That's gut, that's intuition, that's being able to sort of sense what somebody's feeling. And if that subconscious energy is one of negativity or of closed or limited possibilities, people feel
Mhm.
that. They sense that they're also going to be closed off or not willing to sort of play and create and collaborate with you because they're assuming they're not willing to play in the sandbox with me right now. And so
Right.
think about, even if it's not consciously part of how you're thinking, really examine subconsciously what's going on, because that is a component of what people are picking up on, and what possibilities could exist for you if you're just sort of naturally closing things off without even maybe necessarily realizing it, because it's just kind of happening under the surface.
Right. Like if you think about your life and the people that you interact with, and if you say are going into a meeting at work and there's that person who shows up and they're like, these meetings are never worthwhile. Nothing ever comes. Everybody just argues. How much are you going to want to be engaged? If
Yeah,
that same person shows up and they're like, all right, what do we got today? I have some ideas on that project. Everybody around them is going to be like, oh, really? What are your ideas? One of my favorite sayings is when you transform, the people around you change, even when you never thought that they would. And the freedom comes in giving up these preconceived ideas and notions that are holding you back.
totally.
Yeah. Any final thoughts, Shayna, before we say goodbye?
Um, yeah, I think the one final piece I would say is just for people to really examine this. Like, don't just listen to what we're saying and then like go about your day. Really sit down and say, where are there places where I'm using past experiences to determine how I'm handling my current situation? So that's like your takeaway, I'd say, for anybody who's
Yes.
listening, is like, do something with this. This is really helpful information to start to pay attention to.
And then just for fun, for shits and giggles, take it on like a game. Like,
Yeah,
not that it's going to work, it's not going to work, it's right, it's wrong. Take it on like it's a game. Try it out and just see what happens if you let go of that thought and just go at the situation with a different attitude.
I love it.
We would love to hear how that experiment works out for you.
Yes, absolutely.
So it was so wonderful today to see you, Shayna.
You too.
And everybody, please stay tuned for part 3 coming up probably in about a week or so. And we're going to continue with the Energy Block series.